Number 41, the difference between the length of one of the legs of a right triangle and the length of the hypotenuse is 9. What is the triangle's perimeter if one of the legs has length 8? All right, if I'm going to know the perimeter, I need to know the length of all three sides. So this is a right triangle. I'm going to label this A, B, and C. We know the difference between the length of one of the legs of a right triangle and the length of the hypotenuse is 9, and we know one of the legs has length 8. All right, so I just took this, and we know that see, the difference between the one of the legs and the hypotenuse is 9, so I know the hypotenuse, because it's the longest side, minus one of the other sides. I'll just call it 8. Just use that side, will equal 9. So I can tell if I solve this that C would have to equal 17. So the hypotenuse is going to have to equal 17. And I just used the 8 because at least then I had only one unknown instead of 2. And so from here, if C is 17, I now can use Pythagorean theorem to find B. So I'll have 8 squared plus B squared equals 17 squared. And that gives me 64 plus B squared is equal to 289. And so I get B squared is equal to 225, which means B has to equal 15. So that means this side is 15. And then if I add those all together, I'll get 15, because it asked me for the perimeter, 15 plus 17 plus 8, and that did equal 40. So that gave me one of my choices, so that's how I knew to do that. Right, 42. Given that y equals x squared plus 2x minus 3, which is not a possible value for the range, given the domain is between -3 and 1. So the range would be y values. So it's asking me what y values will I not get for this figure. All right, well, first of all, if I'm not sure if I'm talking about domain and range, I would like a picture of this function. You do have your graphing calculators available, and hopefully that's the type of calculator you are using. So if I graphed that, this is actually, I would get, this is what the graph looks like if you graph it. Okay, and it's between -3 and 1, so I'm only looking at this part of the graph, just from x equals -3 to x equals 1, and it's saying what is not possible. So what y value will I not get? So I just looked at the values, and I found this lowest value right here, so you can just start tracing it even if you want to, and I found that the lowest value was -4, which means I will never get a y value of -5, so my answer would be K. Right, 43. If m and n are both integers, how many different integral values of m satisfy the inequality 4 is less than m times n, which is less than 6? So I just started thinking about it here, and I started, let's say m was equal to 1. Could I multiply 1 by another number and get a number that's between 4 and 6? The only thing I can think of to work would be 5. I'd try 2. 2 times 2 would be 4, that's equal to 4. 2 times 3 would be 6, that's equal to 6, so 2 will not work. And then I tried 3. 3 times 1 would be 3, but that's not in between. 3 times 2 is too big, so 3 doesn't work. Then I tried 4. 4 times 1 is 4, doesn't equal it. 4 times 2 is 8, too big. 5 times 1 would also work. 6 times anything is already bigger than the 6. So these are the only two that I found that worked so far. But then I thought, if we're talking about integers, if they're both negative, so if I did -1 times -5, or -5 times -1, those would also be choices that would give me a number between 4 and 6. So there are 4 values of m that would work. So my answer would be D. All right, 44. What is a possible value of y if x minus 0 squared plus y plus 2 squared is equal to 1 squared? All right, what I did on this one was I just started plugging in my possible values of y. So let's say we let y equal 3. First of all, I'm going to rewrite this. X minus 0 is just x squared, so I'm just going to leave it that way every time. Okay, if y is 3, this would be x squared plus 3 squared would be, and this is always going to be 1, 3 plus 2 is 5 squared is 25. So please remember that x is always, when we square it, is always going to be a positive number, so there's no way to add 25 to a positive number and get 1. So that did not work. Then I tried 2, so I'd get x squared plus, if I plug 2 in, 2 plus 2 is 4, 4 squared is 16. There is no way that I'm going to add a number to 16 and get 1, so nope. try y equals 1. So I'll get x squared plus 3 squared, which is 9. Same situation, not going to work. Try 0. We get x squared plus 0 plus 2 is 2. 2 squared is 4. Same thing, cannot work. Hopefully this last one will. We're going to get x squared plus, if I plug in negative 1, negative 1 plus 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1 equal to 1. This time x could equal 0, and this equation would work out. So K is my choice for that one. Right, 45. What are the dimensions of a box that will hold exactly twice as much as one with length 3, width 4, and height 5? So if I'm talking about something holding it, I want the volume of the box. So the volume of the box in question would be 3 times 4 times 5, which would be 60. I would like my box to hold twice as much, so I would like my volume to be a volume of 120, and I need to see which one of these choices gives me a volume of 120. So I'm just going to multiply length times width times height until I get an answer of 120. Well, 6 times 8 times 10 is 480. 6 times 8 times 5 is 240. 6 times 4 times 5 is 120. We found it. It's choice C. 46, which is equivalent to 4 times 10 to the x times 3 times 10 to the 2x all over 6 times 10 to the 4x. All right, we're going to multiply the normal numbers, so I'm going to get 12 times, we're going to add the exponents, x plus 2x would give me 3x, and then 6 times 10 to the 4x. Now we're going to divide the normal numbers. 12 divided by 6 is 2, and then times, we're going to subtract the exponents this time. 3x minus 4x would be negative x. So I look at which one matches that, and I do believe that will be choice J. All right, 47. During the final 20 minutes of an hour-long drive, a car traveled only 10 miles. What was the average speed in miles per hour of the car during the final 20 minutes? So first of all, it says in miles per hour. So 20 minutes would actually be 1/3 of an hour, so I'm going to take care of that right away. Now it said, what is the average speed? Well, I know that distance is equal to rate times time. So rate is the speed, so I know that rate is the distance divided by the time. So the car traveled 10 miles. It took 1/3 of an hour to do that. So 10 divided by 1/3 is 30. So my answer would be A, which is 30. Number 48, the lines A and B are parallel. If the angle measures are as shown in the diagram, then x equals what? All right, so I want to find x, but I think I'm going to have to find y first. I do know that these two are supplementary, which means they add up to 180. So I know that 5y plus 4y is equal to 180. So 9y is equal to 180. So y has to equal 20. So if y equals 20, this angle would be 80. And since lines A and B are parallel, I know that these are corresponding angles. They're in the same spot, so they must have the same angle measure. So x also has to equal 80, which would be choice H. All right, 49, solve x squared plus 2x plus c equals 0 for x. I notice this looks a little weird, but since it's a quadratic, we can actually use the quadratic formula, which is x equals opposite b plus or minus square root b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Remember that a would be 1 because it's the number in front of the x squared. The b will be the 2, and the c will be, all right, and then from here, we will have x equals, the opposite of b would be negative 2 plus or minus square root. B squared is 4 minus 4 times 1 times c would be 4c all over 2 times 1, which would be 2. Okay, from here I'm going to have negative 2 plus or minus. I notice none of those answers match so far. I'm going to factor out a 4 from what's inside of the parentheses, so this is going to be 1 minus c. So it looks like maybe I'm getting a little bit closer. And if I had to guess at this point in time, I'm going to guess E because I've got a 1 minus c inside, and this one has a 1 minus c inside. So if you were stuck for time, I'd automatically go to option E because of that, but I am going to go a little farther. I could rewrite this as negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 1 minus c. We can separate those two. And then the square root of 4 is equal to 2. So I'm going to have negative 2 plus or minus 2 square root of 1 minus c over 2. And now since all parts have a 2, I could divide out a 2. That will give me negative 1 plus or minus the square root of 1 minus c. So that was choice E. All right, number 50. Which of the following cannot be formed by the intersection of a cube and a plane? So we've got a cube, which will look something like, so we've got a cube and then we've got a plane, which a plane kind of looks like a parallelogram. So if you think of like a piece of paper, so I'm going to chop this cube with a piece of paper. We just want to think, what could we not get and what could we get? All right, so if they just touched in one spot, like touched right here, it would be possible that we could get a point, so that's not work. An equilateral triangle, I do believe it's possible to cut that cube with my piece of paper so that it would end up being a triangle, so I'm going to stick with that. If I just put this piece of paper straight down the, if I just put the piece of paper straight down there, I'd chop it into probably a square, which is a quadrilateral. Pentagon I'm not so sure about because it's a 5-sided figure and I'm really not sure how to make that happen. K, although I can't necessarily visualize it, I'm guessing since it's least this is an even-sided object, a hexagon, I would be able to do that because it's also an even-sided object. So I'm going to go with J. It can't be the regular pentagon.